So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another scenario, and hopefully I will be able to do this one a little bit more justice than the last one. Hopefully this one will be plagued by fewer technical issues. You may also notice that Reshade is back, mainly because in the last battle that I showed, obviously, I had thought that removing it might make things a little bit smoother, but it turned out not to be the case, so I decided to re-enable Reshade because it does make things look a little bit nicer. So yeah. But yeah, this was a scenario that I actually do know the maker of. This was made by Lister, who is playing as one of the armies today, and he is going to be playing as Angmar, and this is going to be the Orcs subjugating Umbar, essentially. So you've got this sort of sunken crater with this raised section in the middle holding like a keep, which the Umbar army in the middle is going to have to hold off two advancing armies, whereas on the outside over here, the Angmar force and the reinforcement army from Umbar over there, played by Master Blaster, will have to try and sort of punch through and aid in the Umbar players' defence here in the middle. But I think what we will probably do is start off, well, we'll just go for the outer battle first of all. We'll start off with Lister because he is the one who made the scenario, and he is the one who sent me this replay. So this is Angmar, obviously, and we've got the Witch Realm Inquisitors over here, the Witch Realm riding with them, of course, and then you've got the general model back there. Obviously the Witch Realm Inquisitors are very, very powerful, and in this sort of situation they will be very useful at dealing with basically any Umbar cavalry. Even the Warlords won't be able to go toe-to-toe with the Witch Realm Inquisitors in sustained melee. There are very, very few units in the game that can manage that and come out looking good. Well, none of them will come out looking good, but there are a few that would win, let's say that. We've got some Snaga who are hiding. Obviously, 3 units of Snaga, 1 unit of Archers and 2 units of Stalkers. Obviously, I think this Angmar army is actually intended to lose. In fact, there are 3 units of Stalkers, so they don't have the highest quality, but they are just intended to sort of hold the Umbar army on the outer area of the crater, sort of back as long as possible to give the 2 Mordor armies in the middle the best chance of destroying the central defence. We've got some Orc Fellas, obviously, some AP, which will be useful against Umbar for the most part. 2 units of Orc Fellas, in fact, and then over here we've got some Witch Realm Pikemen without the armour upgrades, so they've got their rusted armour. I do like the rusty look for Angmar, actually. I think it's very fitting. Then we've got some Gundabad Guard, which you don't see an awful lot. I feel as though the Guardians of Khārn Dûm are good to the point that they kind of override the Gundabad Guard in many ways. The Gundabad Guard are generally 100 florins cheaper, but the Guardians of Khārn Dûm are often so good, and Angmar have got such good other anti-cavalry options that the Gundabad Guard often get overlooked, which is a shame because they are a good spear unit. And over here we've got some Angmar Marauders, obviously the bread and butter of the Angmar army. You can see some of them are covered in dirt, some of them are not. Yeah, you know, nothing too special, but their numbers are what gives them their strength. Similar story over here with Barrow-wights. Some of them are caked in dirt and others are not. Obviously the Barrow-wights are going to be one of the primary means by which Angmar are going to try and hold this line because they're so difficult to break down. The Halberds won't hurt either because of the armour-piercing phalanx that they offer. More Gundabad Guard and Angmar Marauders, and then at the front we've also got some Goblin Band, which again you don't see an awful lot of because I think they are very expensive for what they offer in general terms. You know, you're much better off going for the Snaga, but of course in this scenario that doesn't matter too much. It's just more meat for the meat grinder. And then up here we will see the reinforcing Umbar army that is obviously going to be played by Master Blaster. Looks like he's got several units of Castamir's Legion, which is obviously to be expected. They're going to be very, very good against all of the stuff like the Angmar Marauders and the basic units. Even the Gundabad Guard will not do too well against the Castamir's Legion. So it remains to be seen how well Angmar will be able to hold back this Umbar army. We've got some Númenórean Shield Guard back here as well, so obviously a very good spear unit. Very similar story there. The Naruna Aru Sentinels are also going to be a very good matchup to the Witch Realm Pikemen in the lines. Some Abrazanim Narduzagar without the armour upgrade as well, but they're also going to be backed up by Castamir's Legion, so a very, very strong army. I think this might be the single strongest army on the field, actually, trying to punch through and reinforce the army in the middle. Abrazanim Nardubawib as well, obviously going to be able to easily defeat stuff like Snaga in a skirmish fight, even with the numbers discrepancy because of how tough they are. And obviously, you know, the Abrazanim are one of the best archers to bring to a skirmish fight just because of how survivable they are. Then we've got some Harbingers of Castamir, or Harbingers of Castamir, whichever you prefer. They are multiple HP and they're dual wielders, and they're somewhat of a unique entity in the game. Generally speaking, I have noticed it's probably the least... It's probably the most unsafe elite pick that you can bring as Umbar. But in this situation, where they're very likely to get involved in sort of a grindy line fight right from the off, they could be very, very good indeed. And then we've got a pretty sort of extensive cavalry line. Obviously we have the Warlords, which is where one of the Umbar generals is going to be today. And obviously, you know, the Warlords are very, very strong. But they won't be able to beat the Witch Realm Inquisitors 1-to-1, but it might be a good idea to just sort of hold these guys back until Angmar is destroyed and then try and recharge the Mordor armies in the middle with them. Then we've got some Merc crossbowmen, and then we've got 2 units of the Umbar Númenórean Lancers. Obviously, again, very good Lance Cavalry. Similar story with the Warlords, though you want to keep them away from the Witch Realm Inquisitors. Now into the middle, we'll go through both of the Mordor armies today, and the first one's going to be played by Froggy. He's got some mountain trolls here lurking at the back, so we're going to be going from elite to grunts here at the front. We've got some Temple Executioners who actually don't have their armour upgrade. The officers do, but the main infantry units do not. But even without that, they're still one of the arguably the strongest sort of two-handed sword unit in the game. The Haven Guard might have something to say about that. The Elisar's Vanguard are not lagging not too far behind either. And also, depending on how you classify them, the Arthalion Inanwaith, of course, from Mirkwood have definitely proven themselves in recent times to be able to mix it with the best. Got some Moran Guard here at the back, which is a tactical move just in case Umbar break through quickly, obviously to have some spears to try and intercept that cavalry. Then we've got some Moran Infantry, obviously the bread and butter of the Mordor line. The Black Legion, everyone's favourite unit because of how they can push through lines. The Black Legion might be very, very important here for Mordor, we shall see. We've got some Nazgul as well, so 13 of them over here, with obviously the general in there as well. Provided they are in a blob, which is very likely in the middle fight here, they should be able to do very, very well for themselves. We'll see if Umbar can stop them. Moran Infantry, some Orc fodder as well. We've also got some Minas Morgul chosen, so I think Froggy's got a pretty well balanced army between sort of basic units like the Moran Halberds, Archers and Infantry, as well as some heavy maulers and a few fodder units. And then he's also got some strong units as well. Overall, a very strong Mordor army this, for the task that it's been given. Before we get into the middle, we'll go through Brainy Smurf's army as well, who is playing as another Mordor force, and he's got some Moran Infantry as well. Of course, we've got some Orc Archers, also some Moran Halberds. It looks as though he's got, Orc Maulers. It looks as though his army is a little bit sort of more focused around the numbers side of things. Heavy Maulers as well, Moran Infantry. A lot of this is sort of more basic units. He has still got some Minas Morgul chosen, Black Legion, and the Sauron's Will, which are all a little bit stronger. He's also got the Olag High, which Froggy does not, and some Orc Javelins, which are always a useful tool. Some more Minas Morgul chosen back here. He's got some Troll Drummers, some more Moran Infantry, but back here he's also got a couple of units of cavalry. He's got the Melkor's chosen and the Númenórean Lancers, which could prove to be quite important if the Umbar cavalry around the outside manages to break through quickly. We shall see. And then here in the middle, we have Eclipse 2500 playing as the Umbar force in the middle, and his army is not as good as the Umbar army on the outside. He has to hold for as long as he possibly can, so he's got some Corsair Pikemen and some Belagaea Halberds here at the front, backing them up with Belagaea Footmen, Abrazani Nardu Tariq, who do have the armour upgrade, Corsair Infantry, who have the armour upgrades, and then we also have some Corsair Savages, who I think they have those shoulders. I think they have an armour upgrade, but with the Corsair Savages, the armour upgrade is sort of going to have a minimal effect on what they're strong and weak against anyway. Corsair Pikemen, a couple of units of. Some Narina Aru Royal Guard, and this is going to be Ar-Pharazôn over here defending his castle. Obviously very, very strong, very, very resilient. Then we've got some more Belagaea Halberds of Castamir's Legion, Harbingers of Castamir. He has got some strong units here at the back. He's got some standard Corsair Archers as well as some more standard Corsair Archers. Then up here, some more standard Corsair Archers. I'm sure as well he's probably got some Rangers hidden around here somewhere. Rangers and Crossbow Corsairs can both hide, and both Umbar armies could very well have access to them. But without further ado, let's begin. Not a very long battle for a scenario this at 23,000 frames, which means of course the action's going to get underway very, very quickly. So you can see that obviously Brainy Smurf and Froggy are going to send forward the vast bulk of their army to just sort of try and charge up and destroy Eclipse 2500's army as quickly as possible. Which means Eclipse can't really afford to layer his defence too much as the Harbingers start chanting. Because if he does, then Mordor are just going to break through them one by one. I think what he really needs to do is just sort of make a very thick defence on this initial hill here, and just sort of hold it. And that will be the best way to deal with things. That's honestly the best way to deal with a large Orc force, because otherwise they will just try and push through you, and they will probably be successful, particularly seeing as they've got sort of 2 units of Trolls, one of which is the Olag High. They've obviously got the Troll Drummers as well, but you're not likely to see them attack too quickly. But obviously a couple of units of Black Legion as well means that Mordor can afford to be very aggressive, especially if Umbar layer their defence, but we shall see. But it's actually quite likely that the initial engagement will probably be here on the outside of the crater between Angmar and the reinforcing Umbar army, and of course this Umbar army is very strong. If they're able to get through Angmar as efficiently as possible and start recharging Froggy's army with all of this cavalry, it could turn the momentum of the fight pretty quickly, because obviously from the off here Umbar are in a little bit of a precarious position. They may have the single strongest army on the field, but they are also isolated from one another, and one of their armies is, you know, very much under the cosh between two of the strongest attacking armies. Angmar definitely have the weakest overall army on the field with their abundance of Snaga. They've also got that Goblin band, of course. It's actually interesting here that Angmar have set up their front line over here, because this of course opens the door for Umbar to completely circumvent the situation and just go down here with their cavalry, which would probably be the thing to do at this point in time, to be honest with you. Try and recharge Froggy's army as it's moving, especially seeing as the Black Legion are at the back. The Black Legion are priority target number one in this sort of situation. Without them, Mordor's pushing power becomes significantly less. Even with the trolls, the Olag-hai are more of a sort of sustained combat troll more than anything else. We'll see what Eclipse intends to do here. I'd be very surprised if he charged these savages down the hill to meet this fodder. Instead, it looks as though he is just going to bank up on the line with them, give his line a little bit more depth, and obviously the Corsair savages will also add a little bit more AP, a little bit more attack. And in general, he has got the tools to hold pretty well here. He's got a lot of pikemen, even if they are Corsair pikemen. We've seen them do very well in the past. He's got a lot of halberds. He's got some elites as well, which if Mordor get too aggressive, he can punish them quite severely by committing his elites early, which is honestly what I would be very tempted to do. Looks like Brainy Smurf is going to send forward some Orc Maulers first of all. He'd probably be well advised to wait for a little bit more support though. Individual Orc units are not going to be able to break through a phalanx like this. Keep an eye on that, however. We still have this, and we have Umbar sort of moving forwards. I'm very surprised actually that the cavalry has not just decided to go around. There is obviously the danger there that they could get surrounded by the Witch Realm Inquisitors, which is fair play. But even, I think if the Witch Realm Inquisitors were ganged up on by all of Umbar's attacking cavalry over here, particularly seeing as there are Merc crossbowmen lurking around, could be in a little bit of trouble. Yeah, Brezanium are getting up on that hill. They should be in range as well. That high ground should give them a significant boost, and indeed they are. So what are they going to be firing at? Probably the halberds. The halberds will probably be the best target. No shield, of course. The Gundabad Guard will be able to stand up to arrow fire pretty well. Now, I say that the Angmar Marauder is not really worth going after, but then you're just going to be hitting what you hit in this sort of situation. I mean, you can scarcely miss, which is the good thing, so no arrows will go completely to waste. Goblin Band hiding there in the middle, but Umbar, you know, this Umbar army needs to, you know, be a little bit, needs to be quick with things here. If they set up a front line over here, then the Witch Realm Inquisitors would not be able to push through it, and there are some crossbow Corsairs over there as well, and then their cavalry would be free to try and attack over here, and you can actually see that as the line was reorganising itself, Mordor advanced forward. I'm very confused as to why Eclipse was trying to reorganise his line in such a way, because he left himself wide open for an attack, and Brainy Smurf and Froggy don't really have anything else to focus on at the moment, so they were obviously going to be able to take advantage of the situation that presented itself. Now, I will say that the Orc Mauler's AP is not going to be very useful against the Corsair Savages at all, but the same really applies vice versa as well. I mean, the Orc Maulers do have some armour, but it's not exactly, you know, their priority. They are just meant to be a cheap AP shock unit. As the Corsair Savages forming up the first line here. Interesting approach thus far. I can only imagine that this is going to be the case of slowly but surely Mordor are just going to feed more and more units in here, and it's going to become very difficult for Umbar to continue to hold the line. You can also see over here that the Orc Javelins are already in position, throwing their javelins into the Balagaya halberds. Good choice of target as well. Several of them fall in the first volley. And here is a big problem. I mean, I think Eclipse is making a few pretty significant mistakes here, because he's going to be falling back. If only one unit of Corsair Savages is holding this bottleneck, then Mordor are just going to charge forward and obliterate them, and then your army is split in two. And that's the last thing you want in this situation. You really, really need to hold a choke point with the full force of your army. You can't afford to be split in half. And Mordor are sort of lurking with intent. They've got several units of Morannon infantry. They've got some Sauron's Will waiting as well, which would be a real problem for a lot of these Corsair units. The Sauron's Will, obviously better in terms of quality than a lot of these units they've got deployed over here on Umbar. Would make a very good central pillar to this advance as well. I think they inspire nearby units, which would be a very useful thing. Froggy going to be sending forward a unit of Morale on infantry to help with the advance. But yeah, this unit of Corsair Savages, evenly matched fight so far. The Orc Javelins are actually throwing at the Corsair Archers, which actually, if I was Eclipse, I would be fine with that, because the Orc Javelins are not going to be able to kill off the entire unit of Archers with their ammunition, and honestly, their Javelins would be much better at trying to target down something a little bit more dangerous than the Corsair Archers. So he should probably just keep them in place, let them tank this damage, because they're still going to be able to use their ammunition regardless of how many. They are losing quite a lot of men though, to be fair. These Orc Javelins are doing a lot of damage. Eclipse does pull them back at this point. You need to start thinking about reinforcing these Corsair Savages. As I said, layering your defence is really not the way to go in this situation. Meanwhile, the advance has happened on this side. We have Umbar fully advancing with the Castamir's Legion. Cavalry is loitering with intent as well. And yeah, I would say that, you know, the Orcs have started off pretty well here, mainly because of how Eclipse has sort of set out his defence. We've got the Naru Sentinels, which are in a very narrow formation in between these two rocks. But the Angmar front line is exceedingly unlikely, I think, to be able to force back Umbar, and this is the problem. If he had set up his front line over here, Angmar would have been able to bottle up the Umbar cavalry. But now, there's some Corsair fences over here as well, but now that is not the case, and now Froggy is going to have to, well, to be fair, Brainy Smurf is over here with his Melkor's Chosen, but they are still going to have to contend with Umbar's cavalry sooner than they probably would have liked. This sort of Angmar force at the back over here, doing its thing. The Barrow White's defeat seems certain. You can see, obviously, the quality discrepancy over here is pretty severe, and in fact we will just turn the speed down a little bit while all of this is going on. You can see the Numenorian Shield Guard here. More men are being committed to the front line as well, so Abrazani and Narduzagar further increasing Umbar's advantage. The Castamir's Legion, such a good line infantry unit, and in this situation Angmar don't have much that can really answer that. The Barrow Whites will only hold for so long. They do have the Snaga, of course. They've got several units of Snaga further back. It looks like they're sort of trying to be a little bit more of an annoyance by spreading out their army a little bit further backwards as well. We'll see how that plays out for them. Meanwhile, over here you can see that now Umbar is going to be closing in with their phalanx. The Corsair Pikemen and the Belagai Halberds are now re-engaging, which is good. The Corsair Archers are also firing their fire arrows in here, which is... No, it is actually working. Morale on infantry is already shaken, which means there are no morale buffing units in close proximity. Sauron's Will are now coming forward, which I believe have a morale buff. It's either a morale buff or they cause fear, but I think it's the former. But yes, I mean, it still says that Umbar defeat seems certain, but you know, as soon as they sort of drop their pole arms, they should be okay for the time being. Although, based on the amount of pressure that Mordor are already putting on this front line, I would say it might be worth committing forward some more, and Eclipse seems to concur, because he's going to be sending forward some Corsair infantry just to shore up the front line. And in many ways, what Eclipse has to hope for, really, because he can't hope to really win against these two Mordor armies, but what he can do is just sort of hold them at bay for as long as possible, and hope that that Angmar come in with the steel chair from the sidelines, as it were. Well, Umbar, I should say. Master Blaster's Umbar army. And they should be able to do that. I mean, Umbar's infantry is far in excess of quality of Angmar's army. And now we can see that the Snaga are just sort of pouring down the hill. The Harbingers are over there, which is... You know, the Snaga... This many Snaga might be able to have an impact, but even that's debatable. The Merc crossbows are sort of hanging back out of range. The crossbow Corsairs have been damaged. They're shaken, actually, so definitely the main target of the Snaga archers. The Witch Realm Inquisitors are really the main threat here. Even though they're not shock cavalry, if they get loose, Master Blaster could end up taking losses to the point where it loses the red team the game here. We shall see, though. Snaga sort of pouring down the hill. The Witch Realm Hammer Guard, that was a unit I missed, actually, interestingly enough. So that is an elite infantry unit that they have, but they're getting absolutely hammered by the Corsair Blackguards on the approach, which again was another unit that was hidden at the start. The Abrazanim also firing at them, and even their multiple HP, they're gonna struggle here. Those Snaga are also so inaccurate that they're actually hitting their own men in the back as well. So actually good positioning here from the Corsair Blackguards, whether it was intentional or not from Master Blaster. The Hammer Guard will have an impact on Umbar's front line, but I don't think it will have I don't think it'll be too much of a problem at the end of the day. I think Umbar will still be able to grind through all of this Angmar garbage, and they should be able to do a decent job there. Now this is bold, I think. Very bold indeed. I would actually have held position if I was Master Blaster there and let the Mordor cavalry come towards you, because then you have the benefit of the crossbow corsairs giving you a hand, and a few volleys from the crossbow corsairs and even the Melkor's Chosen will be feeling it. And then that's when Umbar's cavalry advantage becomes manifest, and you can strike, and you can start doing some real damage. Meanwhile, let's go and see what's happening over here. This is much more what you'd like. This is much more what you expect from a scenario. You can see now the trolls have come forward, mountain trolls and the troll drummers. The troll drummers are actually, and the Black Legion of Barad-dûr actually, which has sort of prompted Umbar to commit forward a lot more men. The crossbow corsairs, victory seems certain, but they are being attacked by mountain trolls. So I think at this point it's really all or nothing. I do understand people's frustration with pushing like this, because it becomes like the default tactic in a situation like this, and I do hope that as sort of people make more scenarios, that this becomes less of a thing, and it becomes more encouraged that you don't simply do this, because there's very little that Eclipse can actually do about this. He can commit all of his infantry forward, sure, but eventually he's still going to lose. And it can be really disheartening when you lay out your defence and this is what happens, because also it makes it a real pain in the ass for me to record them as well. Because as we saw in the last battle, especially when there were blobs all over the battlefield, it destroyed the frame rate. And even in this sort of situation, I can't get close to it, otherwise it will crash. So, for my own sanity and also for people's enjoyment, I do hope that scenarios have a bit less of this in the future, or at least there's rules in place to prevent this. Even if it means that it's a 4 versus 2, and there are 3 armies attacking and they have to slowly file in. But again, that's just my hope for the future. I hope that maybe scenarios start to move away from this sort of thing in the future. But we got some Abrazani, and Mordor should be taking losses as they do this. You can see actually that a lot of the Umbar forces' victory seems certain, because of all the damage that they're taking on the approach. And of course, Umbar do have a lot of Corsair archers, which will be able to do a lot of damage on the approach. And the trolls of, well, the mountain trolls in particular, basically all died. The fire arrows are coming in, which are causing a lot of morale issues for Mordor. But now we can see the Minas Morgul Chosen are also moving forward, and another unit of Black Legion, which is probably going to be the final nail in the coffin, to be honest with you. But yeah, I hope Eclipse can sort of stem the tide a little bit longer. Master Blaster at this point, seeing that, he needs to hurry up. He needs to do something quickly, because his ally is struggling, and he can't afford to just sort of leave his cavalry here. The Melkor's Chosen are there, yeah, but you need to start picking away at them with the Merc crossbows. You can't afford to just sort of leave your ally and hang him out to dry. Even if it means putting your cavalry units in severe danger, you need to do something with them. That was the main advantage that this Umbar army was given. And if they do some rear charges on that big blob, that could cause huge morale shocks in conjunction with the Corsair Archers' fire arrows. It could be exactly the sort of thing which wins the red team the match, but Umbar, unfortunately, Master Blaster seems very content to just sort of leave his cavalry hovering around his own army, which is not the answer in my opinion. The Witch Realm Inquisitors do not pose as much of a threat to your infantry. You have enough anti-cavalry down here to deal with them. You have javelins, you have crossbows, you have archers, you have pikes. You know, you have enough to deal with the Witch Realm Inquisitors, and they're not shock cavalry. Your infantry's going to be fine. The Snaga Stalkers are starting to rout off. Obviously, Angmar's infantry line is starting to really feel the strain of this constant bombardment. You can see over here, where Angmar was trying to sort of push in, fire arrows coming forward. And that's a mass rout, so that's pretty much going to be the end of Angmar's infantry line here. All that remains now is just sort of clear up the remnants. The Barrow Wights are still there. There are also a few Hammer Guard, but that's not going to be too much of a problem when Umbar hold this much of a numbers advantage. But I'm very disappointed with how this cavalry's been used thus far. Umbar have made a few misplays, I think, and unfortunately, when you're outnumbered in a scenario like this, that's pretty much going to be that could mean death for you. Meanwhile, this very attractive looking blob is sort of progressing. The Black Legion did push through. Great Shield units do have a tendency to fizzle out pretty quickly though. The Black Legion are already wavering and dying because they are up against Castamir's Legion, Halberds, Pikemen, the works basically. There's also Corsair Blackguard, the crossbow Corsairs are down there as well. There's a lot of missile units up on this hill, including Castamir's Rangers, so Mordor are going to be taking very hefty losses, and they could end up losing this fight if they're not careful. They need to make sure that their men are suitably encouraged. Meanwhile, over here, it has kind of happened to the point where Umbar have kind of been split in half, and these units down here are a little bit isolated, but they're still fighting hard. They're still doing their best. Mordor, I think, still do have the... we've now got some heavy maulers routing 187. And again, this could be another situation, another battle, just like the last one, where routing could prove to be one of the main deciding factors. These Corsair archers still routing. I do think that Mordor have got enough in reserve to ultimately wear down Umbar, but at this point they actually do need to commit forward more, I think. I think they have committed to this sort of large-scale assault. And these Abrazani Nardu Tariq, I mean, if you have a look from on high, there is a lot of routing going on, a lot of retreating, and their attack is in danger of fizzling out here. Meanwhile, Umbar's force has moved forward. Umbar's cavalry has decided to try and hunt down what's left of Angmar. Númenorian Lancers over there. You can actually see that the Witch Realm Inquisitors are going to sort of retreat, probably go right around, because there is another way down into the canyon on the other side, which I'm sure you saw. And now the Umbar army is going to turn around and hopefully, at long last, try and attack Froggy's army in the rear. Obviously there are still a few routing units, hence the fighting sound effect, Corsair Fencers. There's still units in here fighting away. It is Hammer Guard as well, only 6 of them, mind you. But this is going to be the end. So this is now the situation that is at hand. This Umbar force needs to rapidly move on. They need to make up for all the lost time, essentially, and start to put pressure on the rear of Mordor's armies over here. That would be the hope. Around on halberds over there. Meanwhile, I mean, Mordor over here, they should still win, I think. Because, you know, a lot of these missile units are eventually going to run out of ammunition. And they do still have units in reserve. Minas Morgul Chosen. They've got the Olag High. Some infantry as well, some halberds. More heavy maulers. The Temple Executioners in there, and defeat is a distinct possibility. I mean, it's not often that you see the Temple Executioners. This is kind of where the game I have been given this replay before, and this is the part of the battlefield where it would always crash, so I'm a little bit sort of nervous to be this close to proceedings, but I think, you know, most of what you see is corpses, so we're fine. Yeah, the Temple Executioners should, in theory, be enough to sort of turn this battle around if they're supported properly. These heavy maulers need to get their thumbs out their asses and get into the combat here. Seems like they heard me. Good. But over here, Mordor delved too deeply and too greedily, I think, because they pushed through, sure, but they started to take grievous losses very quickly. And weirdly enough, I felt very sure that Mordor were just going to keep up the assault and commit basically everything in their armies and just sort of wash over Umbar. But it seems that I was mistaken. They didn't do that, and they've paid the price for it, because they've run out of steam. And that's bad news indeed. I mean, if we have a look over here, you can see Brady Smurf's Númenorian Lancers and Melkor's Chosen. Master Blaster's still being conservative with his cavalry, but at this point I say he can probably afford to be. This is not going to be sufficient to worry his cavalry force at this point. I mean, the Melkor's Chosen are very strong, but as long as he keeps his Merc crossbows and his crossbow Corsairs in close attendance, he should be fine. Oh, hello. The Witch Realm Inquisitors are going to be charging downhill into the Abrazani Narduzagar. Again, they are not shock cavalry, but they actually did a lot of damage there going downhill. And Abrazani Narduzagar are a good target to go at, but they're a strong unit. Not exactly a unit you can afford to throw away quite so easily.
The battle is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
The Orcs announcer still sounds confident of his chances, even though they have lost more men. But as we've seen previously, the attackers will often bring it back in the late game. And the Witch Realm Inquisitors now, Master Blaster sending most of his forces forward, and again he's allowing the Witch Realm Inquisitors to essentially just chew away at his backlines. He has sort of set up a rear guard now of the pikes and his spears, but not before his Narduzagar and his fencers have taken grievous losses, and the fencers are almost entirely destroyed. It does go to show that these sort of melee knights, as they're dubbed, you know, while they don't have a big charge bonus, they are still very capable. of doing this job. Not quite to the same level as a unit of normal knights would, but even so. Patrol Inquisitors, the Abrazzanim already shaken, so 2 units cut down to size there very nicely. Some Orc Fellas have returned from routing, so at this point Angmar can be a nuisance. These Abrazzanim might actually be completely destroyed at this point. Meanwhile, what have we here? These horses are still just sort of hanging out. Right, let's go and see. Have Mordor reversed their fortunes over here? You would imagine that eventually the numbers would start to pay dividends. Harbingers of Castamere, the Submitus Morgul Chosen still fighting where they push through, but they're about to fall apart. Meanwhile, these crossbow Corsairs taking damage. Obviously they're terrible when they're under arrow fire. Very much glass cannons, but presumably they've done a lot of damage because Mordor's advance was stunted somewhat, and I imagine the Umbar skirmishers had a lot to do with that. It's hard to tell when the blob is quite so large and intimidating, but the Castamire's Rangers and the crossbow Corsairs are definitely good in that sort of situation from a damage and body piercing point of view. Now with that sorted out, Umbar are going to be able to reinforce this front line once more. And we've got some Corsair archers, presumably they're out of ammunition, just being committed to the front line. It's more men that Mordor are going to have to try and sort of hack their way through. I imagine the Temple Executioners are still on the front line somewhere. But yeah, Umbar's front line is now starting to struggle a little bit. And Mordor do still have reserves. More Saurons will be committed forward, some Minas Morgul Chosen. They've got Halberds actually sort of defending their sidelines, as Master Blaster is sort of hovering with intent for this cavalry. Moran on heavy maulers. More Saurons will be committed forward. The Orc archers are still firing, and these cheap archers have done a pretty decent job at sort of trying to deal with some of the Umbar skirmishers. And at this point, actually, Mordor are kind of boxed in. They're going to have to use their cavalry more defensively to prevent Umbar's lancers from getting off any nice charges. Let's go and see what's happening back here with the Witch Realm Inquisitors. They seem to be going off in this direction now. They might go all the way around the houses and go into the crater from the other side. It will take them a long time to do that, and they'll surely be exhausted by the time they do. These Orc fellas are not going to be able to break through Naru Sentinels or Shield Guard, but this essentially does mean that Umbar's infantry is now free to sort of try and engage Mordor from the side, which now this is the point where the Mordor armies need to make a decision. They need to either try and crush Eclipse's army very, very quickly, which I don't think is possible at this point, not in the time frame they need, or the time frame they have rather, or they need to think about being a little bit more defensive, because the tide might well be turning here. They're still more than 10% behind, only just, but even so, that's a lot of percentage points to make up, considering this Umbar army down here is made up of strong units. They have been in combat, of course. All of them have been in combat with an Angmar front line, so none of them are going to be fully fresh. But it looks as though Mordor is keen to try and smash through this area over here, because they are now committing forward the Olag High, which will do a lot of damage, because, you know, obviously the Olag High, of all the trolls, I think they are the strongest in sustained combat overall. You know, the Trolls of the White Hand and the Angmar and Gundabad Trolls are also up there, but I think the Olag High, based on stats, are the strongest sort of all round. Obviously the Trolls of Angmar have got those big shields, which helps them out a little bit. We've got some more Corsair archers being committed to the front, but it's sort of all hands on deck when you're sending Corsair archers to try and stop the advance of Olag High. The Olag High will be able to really do a lot of damage, and actually some of these Umbar forces are starting to waver now under the weight of the Trolls. So it could be that Eclipse's army is now genuinely starting to struggle quite a lot. Castamire's Legion are going to be committed forwards as well. Harbingers of Castamere and the Naru Royal Guard. So they do still have elites that they can commit forward. They've got the Castamire's Rangers, but from here, looks like they do have their swords out. Blackguards, which are not bad in melee. They're not world beaters, but they're not bad. So, this is a very interesting and sort of intriguing situation that has cropped up here. There's routing from Mordor's front line as well, which is the last thing they needed in this situation. They needed momentum to sort of carry them through Eclipse 2500's army. and that has not been forthcoming thus far. Around on infantry, I mean the Harbingers are still going to be a little bit difficult. Corsair archers are still firing, so they do still have some sort of ranged presence, which is presumably not helping matters. These Orc Maulers and Heavy Maulers could return based on how many of them there are, and Mordor may need them to return at this point. Meanwhile, these crossbow Corsairs, Brainy Smurf, is essentially powerless to prevent this Umbar force from just sort of hitting them from the front, obviously, which is going to be pretty bad for them. Minas Morgul Chosen sort of loitering in attack. We are now into the sort of the final stages of this match, so it will be decided one way or the other relatively quickly. And I think the defenders here in Umbar might have this one, because I don't think Mordor have got the manpower left to deal with Master Blaster's army in addition to Eclipse 2500's army, unless there's a severe rout. But Umbar's higher tier units have got good morale. You wouldn't expect them to rout in this situation, not to the same extent that some of the Orc units have been routing. Here we can see the Narun Arur Guard. Our Pharazon himself going to be moving in. Where is that Mordor Cav? Mordor Cav, Umbar Cav. It's still just sort of hanging out. I'd be disappointed if we didn't get to see some sort of Cav on Cav violence. But at this point, all they've done really throughout this entire match is sort of stare menacingly at one another. Hello. We may very well get something here. One can hope. This could be seen as a bit of a risky move from Umbar and Master Blaster, because if they do lose this horribly, the Melkor's Chosen and Mordor's Númenórean Lancers will then have free reign to sort of hammer and anvil Master Blaster's relief force, and that could be the sort of thing which turns this battle around. Although they are going to be able to get a charge off, so perhaps not. But the Númenórean Lancers don't kill a single Melkor's Chosen in that initial charge, and that fight is likely to turn pretty ugly pretty quickly for the Númenórean Lancers, and they actually block the Warlord's charge as well. Although the Warlord's charge does connect and does kill a couple of the Melkor's Chosen, so the initial charge presumably did do some damage. So, let's see what our Pharazon and his knights have got. They did some good initial damage, but the Melkor's Chosen are one of the scariest cavalry fighters there are. And I would imagine the Melkor's Chosen are still going to win this fight, and indeed they are. The charge not going to be enough. Mordor's Númenórean Lancers, meanwhile, are being utterly overwhelmed by the Umbar ones. The Merc crossbows are not in the best position. They need to be over here, shooting right along the Melkor's Chosen, not trying to go over the heads of their own knights. Sort of flip-flopping backwards and forwards here between who's going to win and who's going to lose. There's still the Witch Realm Inquisitors to think about here in the late game, which could yet be some sort of presence. They've already done some decent damage to Umbar's infantry up to now. Melkor's Chosen defeat seems certain. Are you sure? I think it's the close proximity of all these Númenórean Lancers which is sort of tilting things in favour of Umbar. Now though, this is going to be the end. The Merc crossbows are going to be shooting the Melkor's Chosen in the back, and that's going to be exactly the sort of thing which they're good at. So this will be victory for Umbar in the cavalry front finally. To be fair to Brainy Smurf, he had other things to try and focus on with his infantry, and his cavalry was just sort of sitting there. And the Umbar cavalry, despite being used a little bit too passively so far in the battle for my tastes, ultimately has come good here in the later game. And that's going to be the end of the Melkor's Chosen. Meanwhile, the Witch Realm Inquisitors, you can see a lot of routing still going on. This army down here, the Morannon Infantry and the Morannon Halberds, by the looks of things, actually looking like they could win this fight. Although with the arrival of the Narun Aru Sentinels, that may very well turn around once more, as Master Blaster's army continues to try and fight their way through. They are actually pulling things back here, the Orcs. Only 7% the gap now, although the loss of Mordor's general might hurt that somewhat. There's some Orc archers over here as well. What's going on up here? Maybe, but up here, I mean, the Harbingers are still fighting hard, they've still got Corsair Archers, Castamir's Rangers are still firing, so those body-piercing projectiles still being used to good effect. These Corsair Blackguards, essentially Mordor, are surrounded once more. Although it is Minas Morgul chosen and what's left of the Olag High, so maybe not the easiest prey to chew on. And that's no good. It seems like once again the low morale of the Orcs is hurting them. What on earth is going on? Oh, I see. The Witch Realm Inquisitors trying to get into the Blackguards, and they were somewhat successful. I mean, these are only Númenórean Lancers. The Witch Realm Inquisitors could probably get away with turning around and just killing them. Númenórean Lancers, Lance Cavalry, no anti-cavalry bonus. Although they are getting supported by admittedly battered crossbow Corsairs. I mean, this is still interestingly close. I still think Umbar have probably done enough at this point in the battle to win. And the Witch Realm Inquisitors have, to be honest, taken enough damage that this could be... they've taken enough damage that they're probably not going to be able to survive, especially not now that the Warlords are coming back over here. Of course, our Blackguard's getting in there as well. Yeah, I mean, it was a worthwhile attempt. You can see here that a lot of these Morannon units are sort of reforming and coming back. The Narinaru Sentinels have trapped these this Mordor infantry in. But yeah, once again, we've seen morale be one of the primary deciding factors in this fight, because if there wasn't the scale of routing that we saw, I believe Mordor probably would have won this fight. But as it was, they didn't manage to keep themselves together. Maybe a bit reckless to commit the Troll Drummers to melee so early, because they could be such a useful tool for keeping your men pointed in the right direction. But as it was, not so much in this situation. Orc Archers are fighting Abrazani Narduzagar, which is maybe not the engagement they were hoping for. Some Morannon infantry fighting a very depleted unit over here of... Is that the Fencers? It is. Here come the Merc crossbows from Umbar, so this is going to be the end. This is finally what all of the Umbar cavalry would have wanted to do this whole time. I mean, it's going to be the Inquisitors first of all, but the Umbar cavalry channeling up here, surrounding and finishing off the Mordor attacking force. So the defenders win this scenario. Again, we see the defenders win. Seems like a somewhat common occurrence, actually, lately. This was especially surprising. I thought for sure that when Mordor started pushing through this defence with their full might, I thought they were going to commit everything and just sort of wash over Eclipse 2500's Umbar force here in the middle, but they didn't. And that was probably the deciding factor, because early on I felt for sure that Umbar, the little mistakes that Umbar were making, in my opinion, I thought they would add up, because defenders, their mistakes are often amplified, but in the end, this time it was the attackers who made the error. They either needed to be more patient with their attack here on Umbar in the middle, or they needed to be more aggressive and just commit everything. As it was, they kind of went for an in-between approach, which kind of didn't work out. Master Blaster's army still in decent condition. Eclipse managing to hold the middle here, and our Pharazôn has managed to claim victory. There goes a Mordor general, and that'll be Froggy. And the Nazgul were in here, of course, but keeping track of the Nazgul when it's a blob fight of this magnitude is completely impossible. They are over here, but they are now being charged. There's only 4 of them left. There's also the troll officer over there, who is surrounded by the riders of Umbar. Oh dear. There goes our Pharazôn, though, getting killed by the Witch Realm Inquisitors. That's very unfortunate for him, because that was Eclipse's general. The one who has held this keep here in the middle for so long died right at the end. But as it is, didn't make too much of a difference. And looks like Eclipse did claim the most kills, because he certainly had the larger of the 2 Umbar forces. And let's have a look. So, yeah, Witch Realm Inquisitors did most of the damage for Angmar. That's not surprising, considering... Well, actually, no, Snagar Archers did a lot of damage. So good for them. Obviously, even cheap archers can do a lot of damage when they're situated in the right position. The rest of their force obviously struggled because of the vast superiority of the Umbar force, the Umbar relief force that was on the outer edges. The Hammer Guard did decently, but they were also being focused down by javelins and archer fire the whole time they were in combat. And they were also in an area where the Harbingers of Castamere were, which is one of the units that can actually go up against them and not get totally slaughtered. So yeah, overall I think the Angmar player did the best with what he had, and obviously he was a creator of the scenario, so he knew what he was getting himself in for. His frontline obviously did as well as it could have done, but I think in particular the use of his Witch Realm Inquisitors was probably the best thing that he did. Yeah, I think Mordor, if they had been more aggressive or significantly less aggressive, that would have been the way forward. As it was, the in-between approach didn't really work, and that's kind of the thing with a lot of these battles. If you need to commit to one sort of, you can't go for a sort of in-between approach. Like it's similar to sort of setting up a layered defense. The vast majority of cases it won't work. You need to either fully commit or you need to be significantly more cautious, and that will often yield the best results. But yeah, the Umbar players did pretty well, despite a few things early on which I didn't necessarily agree with. Ultimately, it all worked out for them, so it shows what I know. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this scenario. I certainly did. A big thank you to Lister for making it and for allowing me to show it. Hopefully he makes more. More scenario makers is always good, and I'm always happy to show off people's work and give it some exposure. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which probably, I don't know, because I've been given quite a lot of stuff recently which I can go through and choose at my leisure. So yeah, this was a better scenario than the last one, I think, based on the fact that it actually ran smoothly. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed.